You have the preamble, please.
This meeting is compliant with the Ralph M. Brown Act as amended by the California Assembly Bill number 361, effective September 16th, 2021, providing for a public health emergency exception to the standard teleconference rules required by the Brown Act. The purpose of this is to provide a safe environment for the public, staff, and council members while allowing for public participation. The public may address the council using exclusively remote public comment options. Council may take action on any item listed in the agenda. Public meeting videos. Members of the public may view the City Council meeting by logging into the Zoom webinar listed below. City Council meetings can also be viewed live and or on demand via the city's YouTube channel, youtube.com/BrisbaneCA, or on Comcast Channel 27. Archive videos can be replayed on the city's website, brisbaneca.org/meetings. To address the council. The City Council meeting will be an exclusively virtual meeting. The agenda materials may be viewed online at brisbaneca.org at least 24 hours prior to a special meeting and at least 72 hours prior to a regular meeting. Remote public comments. Meeting participants are encouraged to submit public comments in writing in advance of the meeting. Aside from commenting while in the Zoom webinar, the following email and text line will also be monitored during the meeting, and the public comments received will be noted for the record during oral communications 1 and 2 or during an item. Email ipadilla@brisbaneca.org. Text 628-219-2922. Join the Zoom webinar with the webinar ID 991-9362-8666, the passcode 123456, and the call-in number 1-669-900-9128. If you need special assistance to participate in this meeting, please contact me, the City Clerk, at 415-508-2113. Notification in advance of the meeting will enable the city to make reasonable arrangements to ensure accessibility to this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, City Clerk. I'm calling the meeting to order at 7:33 p.m. Could we have a roll call, please? Oh, I'm sorry. Let's do the Pledge of Allegiance first. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. City Clerk, roll call, please.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Here. Thank you.
Councilmember Davis.
Here.
Councilmember Lentz.
Here.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Here.
And Mayor Mackin.
Here. Thank you. City Attorney, can I have a report, please, out of closed session?
Good evening, Madam Mayor. The council met in closed session to complete the evaluation of the city manager's performance and completed it, and we'll have a report in the next council session on whether or not there will be any wage changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I have a first and second to adopt the agenda, please?
I'll make a motion to approve.
A second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Davis.
Aye.
Councilmember Lentz.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
And Mayor Mackin.
Aye. We move on to awards. And tonight I have a proclamation for Women's History Month. Whereas March is nationally recognized as Women's History Month, first declared in 1987 by congressional resolution, followed every year since by presidential proclamation. Whereas this year's theme, Providing Healing, Promoting Hope, is a tribute to the ceaseless work of caregivers and frontline healthcare workers during this pandemic. It also acknowledges the role of women that has consistently been overlooked and undervalued. Whereas women have made significant strides, distinguishing themselves in all manner of professions and occupations, including serving courageously in the military, we recognize the further need to advance parity in earnings and gender equity in our society. Whereas we celebrate the achievement of women who now serve as elected officials in all levels of government, including the highest level in the executive branch as vice president. This would not be possible had women not secured the right to vote. Whereas 4 of the 5 current members of our city council are women, we hope to inspire the young women of Brisbane to continue as community leaders and change makers. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Brisbane City Council proclaims March 2022 as Women's History Month. Women of every race, class, and ethnic background make historic contributions to Brisbane in countless recorded and unrecorded ways. We celebrate them and the value women and women-led organizations contribute to the strength, health, and richness of our city and our families. And I understand tonight we have Michelle Woodruff and June Hevner, who are co-chairs of the Mothers of Brisbane, to accept the proclamation. City Clerk, are they in attendance? I'm looking, oh, there they are. Ladies, would you like to say something about Women's History Month?
Yes. I am honored to accept this proclamation of March as Women's History Month on behalf of the Mothers of Brisbane. And I would like to thank the City of Brisbane for highlighting the important work of women in Brisbane and outside of Brisbane. The Mothers of Brisbane is composed primarily of women and provides support for families of every kind in the community through our email group, Facebook page, meals program, and events. And our next event is our rescheduled Mob Shop, which is a Brisbane-wide clothing and kids gear rummage sale, which will be held at Mission Blue on May 7th and 8th. This will be our first time holding it since 2020. And it has been in demand as an easy way to repurpose clothes, toys, and baby items that might otherwise end up discarded. Thank you for choosing the Mothers of Brisbane to accept this proclamation and for letting us highlight what we do.
Thank you. Ms. Hevner, did you want to say something as well? No? Okay, I would just personally like to thank the Mothers of Brisbane for your ongoing and historic contributions to Brisbane. You really are part of the rich fabric that we have in our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have a raised hand, Madam
Oh,
Mayor.
yes,
Councilmember
Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you. I think I'm off mute. Can you hear me? Michelle, thank you so much. And, June, I've watched you guys for so many years, and it's just such a thrill. It's such an honor to see that we're giving this proclamation to you guys for all the hard work you've done. When the Mothers of Brisbane first came about so many years ago, it was so much fun to hear that. I'm not sure if either of you were there right at day one, but oh my gosh, it was just so much fun to see the women who stood up to support each other. And mostly, I think it was, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, when young moms had babies, this group of people just rallied, and, the moms got meals and all that kind of stuff. Only in a small town can we do that. So thank you, ladies, so much for everything you've done, and for the predecessors, because I know you're not the first people who did this, but so honored. I only wish when I was here back in 1993 that we had you guys, but thanks so much.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay.
Excellent job throughout the years. And yeah, can't say anything more than what Karen just said, because that was it, in a nutshell. Beautiful work.
Madison?
Oh, thank you for being here to celebrate with us.
Terry?
Likewise, and well-behaved women seldom make history.
Very true.
Thank you, ladies. When we move on to oral communications number 1, City Clerk, do we have any member of the public wishing to comment on an item that is not on our agenda tonight?
I see a raised hand, Madam Mayor, from Tom Hine.
Tom, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Happy full moon in Virgo. I had a whole bunch of things I was going to say, but I'm not. All I want to say is I'm not trying to make the police bad guys, nor you guys. I just think it's an important enough issue that the public, your constituents should be aware of and be involved as Assembly Bill 481 asks. So I'm going to leave you simply by saying, I didn't come here to teach you. I came here to love you. Love will teach you. Namaste. Thank you.
We have any other members of the public wishing to speak?
Madam Mayor, I have not received any text messages, email messages, and I do not see any more raised hands.
All right, thank you. We move on to the consent calendar. I do have a request from a member of the public to remove item B from the consent calendar, and therefore I would like to remove item B, and we'll hear that separately under new business. May I have a motion to approve the consent calendar absent item B, or if anyone else would like to remove an item as well?
I'll make that motion and I will remove item B as well.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Cunningham,
Aye.
Councilmember Davis,
Aye.
Councilmember Lent,
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell,
Aye.
and Mayor Mack.
Aye. So we move on to new business, moving the consent calendar item. This is to adopt an ordinance waiving second reading. This is adopting a military equipment use policy per California Assembly Bill 481. Chief Macias, could we have a staff report, please?
Yes, good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council. This evening you have before you for your review and adoption an uncodified ordinance adopting a military use policy as required by state law. Unfortunately, the title of the bill does no justice as its intended goal. Assembly Bill 481.
I know.
Can everybody hear me? Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I heard some background noise.
We were having overtalk, so
So Assembly Bill 41 is intended to increase transparency, accountability, and oversight surrounding the acquisition and use of military equipment within the city of Brisbane. A little bit of background information. Back on September 30th of 2021, Assembly Bill 481, which we'll refer to as AB 481, was signed into law relating to the use of military equipment by law enforcement agencies. AB 481, codified at California Government Code sections 770 through 775, requires the law enforcement agencies prior to taking certain actions relating to the funding, acquiring, or using military equipment to have the governing bodies, which is yourselves, of the local jurisdiction at a regular meeting adopt a military equipment use policy by ordinance. California Government Code sections 770 through 775 establishes the following: requirements for the ordinance, requirements for the military use policy, requirements for an annual equipment report, including public outreach and transparency requirements. California Government Code section 771 subsection B establishes what must be included in the military use policy. We prepared and published our military use policy, which is embodied in Police General Order 709. The Government Code also requires that the police department post the policy on its police website for 30 days prior to any public hearing concerning the policy, thus allowing for any comments, concerns, or questions from the public. The police department complied with this requirement by posting the policy on our website on January 30th of 2022. As of the posting of the policy on our website, we received 2 inquiries, which we responded by email and reaching out personally to address their concerns. California Government Code section 770 subsection C defines military equipment and lists 16 types of military equipment. Of the 16 listed, we have one item which is listed in section 1 of our policy, which you have in your staff report. The policy references two types of qualifying equipment. Section 1 lists qualifying equipment that is owned and or utilized by the Brisbane Police Department. As I mentioned above, we have one item out of the 16 listed. The one item is a less than lethal beanbag shotgun, which we have possessed for over 25 years and have never deployed. Section 2 lists qualifying equipment that is not owned or regularly utilized by the Brisbane Police Department, but which is known to be owned and or utilized by law enforcement units with which the Brisbane Police Department collaborates and or participates for law enforcement purposes. The Brisbane Police Department participates in a regional special weapons and tactics North Central Regional SWAT team, which we will refer to as NCR. They do possess and utilize additional types of equipment that is not owned, purchased, or maintained by the Brisbane Police Department, but is included in the proposed military equipment use policy, as it could be used in the city of Brisbane if NCR team is deployed in extreme circumstances, such as a active shooter, hostage situation, barricaded suspect, execution of high felony warrants or arrest warrants, and other dangerous situations. The equipment that NCR SWAT team possesses could prove to be essential to emergency operations when needed. I believe there were only 2 incidences where NCR team was called out for a response to the city of Brisbane in my 32 years with the city of Brisbane. In addition, California Government Code Section 772 requires that the police department deliver to the city council an annual military equipment report as a mechanism to ensure that the Brisbane Police Department is in compliance with their policy. The report will also assist the city council in determining whether to approve, revise, or revoke components of the military equipment use policy for the subsequent year. The annual report will be made publicly available on the police department's website. After release of the annual report to council, we were required within 30 days to have a community engagement meeting to allow public comment and discussion on the report. California Government Code Section 770 subsection C requires that the proposed military equipment use policy provide avenues through which members of the public may register complaints, concerns, or submit questions about the use of each specific type of military equipment in the policy. They can do so via email, physical mail, or phone to our designated military equipment use officer, which is Commander Mario Garcia, and his information is listed on the website. In addition, the police department will have on its website under military equipment policies and procedures concerning enforcement of the ordinance and remedies for violations. For the reasons set forth in this agenda report and in the policy itself, staff recommends City Council approve and adopt the military equipment use policy as set forth in the Police Department's General Order 709. There is no fiscal impact in adopting this ordinance and the military equipment use policy. This concludes my staff report. In closing, I would just like to say that AB 481 in no way is an avenue to weaponize our police department with military armaments, but to provide oversight and transparency as to what equipment we currently own and are used by the Brisbane Police Department and our NCR SWAT team. As a small department, we rely heavily on mutual aid responses, but in no circumstances do we ever lose control of the decisions that are made within our city limits. The best weapon that we have is ourselves, as we know our community best. And I take that quote from Commander Garcia. Thank you. And myself and Commander Garcia, who's our designated military use equipment officer, and also has been on the NCR as a SWAT commander for the last 15 plus years, are available for council questions.
Councilmember Cunningham, would you like to start?
I have no questions at this time. I have read the reports. As convoluted as some of the information seems to be to somebody who has not read them before, I can see that some of it might be a little confusing, but it is my opinion that what I believe we have in Brisbane is only one stun gun, which could be considered confusing to people who don't know what a stun gun is. But for the County of San Mateo's SWAT team people, I think I'm at this point okay with what I hear from what they're doing with their information. Unless Amanda Garcia has something different to put out to us, I'm okay. Because I think if we have one weapon to use in a horrible situation, I'm okay with it.
Councilmember O'Connell?
I have no questions for the chief.
Thank you. Councilmember Lentz?
First, just want to thank the members of the public who brought this up, because it gave our chief a great opportunity to explain to the community and really to us. I mean, you read the staff report, but it really does help to have that firsthand verbalizing of what an ordinance is, and just getting that background. And it was well said, Chief Macias, and this is about transparency. It's about getting the information out to the public, and knowing that we do not have a history of purchasing military grade equipment, for our police department. That was very refreshing to me, and thank you for you and the rest of your staff.
Thank you.
Councilmember Davis?
I don't have any questions, but just want to thank Lisa and Mario for being here to give clarity, because I know that there was some concern from the community raised. And so I appreciate you going into detail about why this is needed and what the purpose is. And I'm ready to proceed on this item.
Okay. I would just also like to weigh in and just say that any members of the public, when you have questions, I think you'll always find that our police department is extremely responsive. Where else, what other city do you have where you can pick up the phone and they actually will talk to you? So I would suggest anyone who has any problem with anything that's contained in this or something else, contact them directly. Find out from the source. They're more than willing to answer your questions. City Clerk, do we have any members of the public that wanted to actually speak on this item?
I have a raised hand from Tom Hines.
Tom, go ahead.
Hi, I don't dispute anything Chief Macias said, not at all. But as I said before, it is anybody, anywhere, anytime, with any device against anybody. So that means somebody in San Mateo thinks that there should be a tank in Brisbane, they can do so. And the other thing is Assembly Bill 481, Section 1, items A through C talk about public discussions, and we haven't had that. So that's all I'm saying. I don't dispute anything she says, but we need the public to weigh in on this, as the bill asks. Just postpone it. We've got at least till May 1st, if not 180 days after the police posted their comment. Which, the police department is not the place where people go to find out city council populist matters. And there was no outreach on this. You guys did not solicit any input. You put it on the consent calendar so there would be no input. That's not transparency. Not at all. That's hidden. That's secret. Why don't you want the people to put it out there? I don't dispute what the chief says. But when I see 6 policemen kneeling on a man, just today I saw it, it's on the nightly news, I'm concerned. And this is all happening without military equipment. I have concerns. Thank you.
City Clerk, do we have any other members of the public wishing to speak?
I see no raised hands.
I have a question, Colleen.
Yes,
One for Lisa, one for Tom. Tom, has this been noticed properly with what is required?
Yes. The section 1 of the bill that's being referenced is not in the statute. So it does talk about engagement, et cetera, but it's in a broader context. The policy was properly noticed. It was taken off consent specifically because there were comments requesting that so that people could be heard.
Your mic is going out, Tom.
It was taken off.
I couldn't hear that last statement from you.
Thanks. It was properly noticed and it was taken off consent.
Ingrid, mute the closed captioning.
I think we're talking over everybody. It was properly noticed. It was actually taken off the consent calendar when it was noted that we should have a wider discussion availability on it. And I'm not aware of anybody who quarreled with that when we became aware of it. So that's why we're having this discussion tonight. That being said, I will say I've read the bill and reread the bill and reread the bill because it is a challenge. As the chief alluded at the beginning, it is quite challenging to understand where you end up on the bill. But the city has not only met that challenge, I just want to stress, the city has a single 25-year-old shotgun modified to shoot beanbags as a stun device that it's never used. That's what we're talking about tonight. And that's been disclosed long before this policy, and this policy is a new means of disclosing it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. And then to Lisa, I heard, conflicting statements. So the public comment said that anyone, anywhere, even in San Mateo, could decide that a tank can enter Brisbane. But what you said was that it's up to our jurisdiction, it's up to the city of Brisbane, what type of reinforcements and what type of equipment, if we need backup, that we are soliciting. Can you confirm that that is correct?
That is correct, Councilmember Davis. We have control, and if we are going to call for the additional equipment, then we're going to call for whatever we need based on the circumstances at hand. And they are not going to show up in our city without notice. And generally, the notice is given as soon as we have a major incident. As council knows, the notice is given to the city manager, and he reaches out to council. But they just don't show up in your city without us knowing it. And we ultimately have control of what occurs in our jurisdiction.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cunningham?
Thank you. Just Commander Macias, just to make sure that the people within our city feel comfortable with that information, can we put that out again and again and again, that this is how we do business and that it's not a free-for-all, that the police department just does what they want to do? Sorry about that. Just so people understand that, there's protocols that we reinforce and things just don't happen. Is there some way we can continue to put that stuff out that's just reinforcing to our community who feel a little vulnerable over and over again?
Absolutely. We will continue to have it on our website, and we can also work with Caroline to maybe rotate it, through once again. And then when we do our annual report next year to council, then we'll be putting it out on our website and having that publicly, welcome meeting to have the opportunity to discuss the report. And again, the report is a report out if anything is used, if the one item that we have is used within the year, or if SWAT comes into Brisbane and any items are used, what items exactly, what the circumstances were, if any injuries, occurred. It's going to be a very detailed report, and we certainly will, we'll give, publicly announce that meeting so that we can have input on that as well.
Thanks, Chief. I just think, as much information as we can get out as often as possible is our best offense relative to people feeling insecure about something, or, you know, people asking questions that we can't always answer on the spot. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilmember O'Connell, did you want to weigh in?
No, I think that the staff report and the questions and answers from the council members and staff have been adequate for my decision making.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lenz?
I think we've thoroughly discussed the matter. I'm ready to make a decision.
Okay. Okay, then I'm ready. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make that motion.
And a second, please?
Second.
I'll second. Oh,
Okay, Cliff second. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Cunningham,
Aye, thank you.
Councilmember Davis.
Aye.
Councilmember Len,
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
And Mayor Mackin.
Aye. We move in new business on to our next item. Letter K, short-term rental ordinance implementation update. Could we have
Yes.
staff report, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. We've come back a couple times to give the council an update regarding the implementation of our short-term rental ordinance and enforcement procedures. By way of background, the city adopted its ordinance in summer 2020, permitting short-term rentals subject to a number of operational and performance standards. Since early 2021, the city's been in contract with a vendor to automate the short-term rental permit process and monitor short-term rental activity on multiple listing sites, which allows the city to proactively enforce our regulations. Additionally, the city has been collecting TOT for operating short-term rentals as well. And then lastly, recently the council did increase the fines and fees for illegal short-term rental activity. That was in November of last year. So just real briefly where we are right now, we've seen generally a decline in the number of short-term rentals operating. When we first started the program in June of 2021, there were 12 short-term rentals identified. The last review in February identified 5. There were previously number of code enforcement cases just dropped from 12 in June of 21 to 4 in October, and to the 1 as of the writing of this current staff report. Compliance is usually achieved in one of 2 ways. Primarily, one is the removal of listings. The other is people changing their listing to long-term, 30-day or more, which are not regulated by the short-term rental ordinance. A little note that we did receive our first permit application. Unfortunately, we were required to deny it because it did not meet the performance standards under the ordinance. So we have not had a successful application yet. Lastly, in terms of collection of fees, we've collected approximately $5,600 in TOT, an additional $1,100 collected since I last reported to the council last October. With that would conclude my comments. This was an informational item, so no actions required by the council, but I take any questions you might have.
Any council member questions? Councilmember
Have none.
Davis, got a hand up?
Yes. John, can you say what was the, like, what did the application, what standard did they not meet that required them to?
They're not being able to obtain the permit. There are 2 things. There was a lack of evidence that they were an on-site resident. So that's one of the key. You have to be a resident of the facility or of the home. So that was one of them. And there was a question about that was actually a yes, whether or not they were a resident of the facility.
So what type of evidence was requested for that type of, to prove that?
Oh, you get utility bills, certain kind of statements, driver's licenses, IDs. The problem was that site staff also does a site, review for safety issues and other issues. And frankly, we got information on that particular site from an on-site occupant that conflicted with the information presented in the application paperwork. So that was what rode that conclusion, and that was appealed to the Planning Commission. There was a thorough sort of discussion of that issue, and the denial was sustained by the Planning Commission.
And so that property hasn't been operating, like, hasn't been attempting to operate under the radar since the denial, right?
To my knowledge, they removed their listing. I'd have to double check that, but they were actually cited, and then my understanding, it has been resolved.
Thank you. That's all my-
Councilmember Lenz?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So, John, in the staff report, it talks about the amount of active code enforcement cases that has dropped. So it says, and one as of the writing of the staff report. So does that mean that we've had one this year?
Well, when it changed, we had 4 in October, 1 in February. So, that's been dropping off. The 1 active case presently. So we may have had earlier ones, because again, these are they're subject to ebb and flow. Things, you might identify something, send a notice to correct, and a listing's removed. So I don't know in terms of when we dropped from 4 to 1. It is kind of a snapshot in time that we provide you. But the general trend has been a reduction in the number of unauthorized units.
All right. And then, maybe this is a question for Chief Macias. Have you been seeing a significant drop off of complaints from the residents of these particular units?
Yes, we have not received any complaints that have come through the police department, at least.
Well, so that's fantastic. So it seems, hiring this company to do this work on our behalf, in kind of strengthening our penalties for breaking the rules has made a significant difference.
The data would suggest, yes, absolutely.
That is fantastic. Okay. Well, thank you so much. That's good. That's good to hear.
Councilmember Cunningham, any question?
No, thank you.
Councilmember O'Connell?
No, thank you.
I have one last question. John, when you talk about some of the STRs are converting to long-term 30-day plus stays, when we look at the original 12 STRs, are we seeing some that drop off from those listings converting to 30 plus days? Are they listing on the same sites for the 30 plus days?
That's has happened. Yes, that's one of the ways people will essentially correct the violation.
Mm-hmm.
That we'll just repost it for 30 plus day stays. And again, there's an ongoing process of, the company we've hired calls this data on a regular basis. It's not a static, well, we checked it off and we won't go back to it. They'll keep going back. So if that changes again from it was 30 days plus, and then later it shows up as a shorter term, it will be flagged again as a violation again in the future. So again, those are behavioral things that have to happen in order to track, the fact that people can change their listings over time. So that's why we use that firm.
Yeah, and I would just echo what Councilmember Lenz said. I think our residents are probably pleased that we're actually coming to grips with this situation, and that there are some consequences to people who choose to violate it. Councilmember Cunningham, you had a comment?
I do. So the only other thing that is not of concern for me, but something that we need to be looking at is that I have heard throughout the community, and there's no verification that what I have heard is correct or appropriate, but that the people who have had their properties up for Airbnb have now looked at other avenues to rent their spaces, and they put these spaces together as rental properties, which are income producing properties for, flying nurses or whoever else. And so I think we need to look at that. I'm not sure what that means, but that was a way for the people to avoid picking up an Airbnb license and just rent their properties to, flying nurses who come in for a month or all these other things. So I think we still have the same problem in a different arena. If people are making money using their properties as rentals, we still have an issue that, like any other business in Brisbane, like my small business, you got to pay your property taxes, you got to pay a business license and all those kind of things. So, maybe some of that problem is being shifted to a different area. And I appreciate not having Airbnb party houses in Brisbane, but we still have an issue where we're turning some of our rental properties into places that are kind of like short-term hotels. So, maybe we need to start shifting, looking at what that looks like too. So to avoid having to pay for a business license for an Airbnb, they're now renting to nurses and things like that. And I probably just made a few less friends in Brisbane by saying that, but I believe that to be true because that's what we should be looking at, in my humble opinion.
Well, just to clarify, the company that does the reviewing, they look at multiple sites. It's not just an Airbnb scrape. I think it's 40 to 50 different listing sites. Not that somebody can't, if they're very motivated and find something under the radar, that say that doesn't exist, but it is more than just an Airbnb scrape. So I just want to make sure the council and the community is aware that we check, they check multiple listing sites on an ongoing basis. But you're right. I mean, there's always something that comes up, and anything we hear of that comes through a complaint basis or whatever, we will investigate. So again, if that comes up, we'd encourage people to file a code enforcement, and it can be investigated.
Councilmember Davis, you have a hand up again?
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna clarify with John that because the status of a potential STR can change at any time, the likelihood that we'll need to keep this contractor on, for years to come is high, right?
We look at it as an ongoing sort of situation. Absolutely. It might be that we could change vendors over time, or maybe the technology will change. But I think that's why we always do a year-to-year annual renewal. We'd expect we would not have the in-house resources to take this on the way they do.
And then as long as someone's renting their unit for more than 30 days, we can't regulate who they get to rent to, right?
That's correct.
I mean, even if we wanted to, I don't think we can do that.
That's correct. The ordinance, so yes, is specific to stays less than 30 days. 30 days or more considered a month-to-month rental, which are permitted in residential zones.
I would just add to the conversation, one of the operative things that's important here too, that we shouldn't lose sight of, is transit occupancy taxes. And that if someone thinks they're just making a good use of a property they invested in, or they want a side income, they are actually cheating the city of tax revenue. And that's not okay. We have hotels. The city runs on taxes. So
I'm confused about this conversation a little bit, because I feel like we're talking about something that's really not what's on the agenda, but is your comment about stays less than 30 days, or is your comment about stays more than 30 days skirting transit occupancy?
I'm talking about people who will perhaps persist in trying to do the less than 30 days.
I see. Yeah.
Because overall, that to me is really an egregious violation. And I don't know that people who've done it or who may do it in the future think about that at all, but
Absolutely. Has the contractor been able to acquire some of those back TOT taxes?
Well, since I think we're up to about $5,600 that have been collected to date. So whether that constitutes what degree of recovery, is that 50% or 20%? I don't have that information in front of me. I can certainly get that
It's
to
not just
you.
fines, right? Some of it is fines and some of it is TOT.
TOT. Yeah, it's primarily TOT, I believe. Yeah, it's specific to TOT. The $5,600 and $1,100 collected was TOT.
so City Clerk, do we have members of the public that wish to speak on this?
I have not received any text messages, emails. And Madam Mayor, I don't see any hands raised on this matter.
Okay, thank you. John, thank you very much for the staff report. Appreciate that. And we'll be keeping our fingers crossed going forward.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Our next item is item L, application to the state of California for an equitable community revitalization grant concerning environmental investigation on a portion of the Brisbane Baylands site. Could we have staff report, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. In 2021, the governor signed a bill which allocated $500 million to expedite cleanup and beneficial use of contaminated properties within California. The Equitable Community Revitalization Grant Program provide more than $200 million in grants through a competitive process. The grants are available to help local governments, even if the local government does not own the property within its jurisdiction that is contaminated. Grants can range from $80,000 to $7 million, or $80,000 to $7 million in the range of activities. It can actually perform cleanup work. It can also be used to develop work plans for cleanup. And those are kind of the basic categories. So in dealing with BDI, the owners of the Baylands, obviously we know the status of its contamination. They discussed with city staff whether the city would consider applying for one of these grants for purposes of assisting in the development of environmental cleanup work plan and related technical studies for OU2. Ingrid, if you could put up the slide. I think you all know where OU2 is. It's on the west side of the site, sort of the southerly portion. Portion in green on the exhibit is OU2. That does have the approval of the remedial action plan is ongoing for that site. So basically they're looking for grant funds to do additional planning work for that. And again, since, as I mentioned earlier, a private party is not an eligible recipient of the grant, they requested partnership with the city that the city would actually apply for and obtain the grant if successful. So city staff brought this matter to the City Council Baylands Subcommittee, Commissioner or Council members Cunningham and O'Connell for input. The subcommittee was conceptually supportive of the concept, but they did have a number of concerns, which I'll kind of walk through real quickly. First, the subcommittee wanted to make sure it was very clear what activities were going to be proposed under the grant work and the timing for that. So I think on the slide you have some of the studies that we envision will be completed with the requested $3 million grant. Various studies related to contaminants and remediation of OU2. And the total funding request is for $3 million at this juncture for these studies. The other question was timing of these studies. And I don't have the specific timing for any of these individual actions, but there is a 2-year time frame for this grant. So the expectation is that whatever work is approved under the grant needs to be completed within 2 years. So within a 2-year window. Subcommittee had other concerns related to making sure that the city doesn't incur any liability or financial responsibility associated with the implementation, the acceptance, the expenditure of these grant funds. And along with that, I want to make it clear that the city's participation in the grant did not, in no way influence or bias the city council's ability to make an independent judgment about the Baylands project overall. The council retains the right to make in whatever decision they make on the planning of this site, irrespective of the grant. So those were big concerns of the subcommittee, and to that end, legal counsel did prepare an attached reimbursement indemnification agreement, which requires BDI to reimburse the city for any costs the city incurs in administering and overseeing the grant, indemnify and defend the city for potential exposure, and it reflects that submission of the grant application and approval of the agreement does not constitute the city's granting or committing to grant any form of land use entitlement for the Baylands. So those were the issues that were raised by the subcommittee. There's other issue came up of whether or not there were other city activities unrelated to the Baylands that might be able to benefit from this funding program. And public works staff evaluated city-owned properties and may be eligible. City has not completed the appropriate phase 1 environmental site assessments, nor are there any sites that are under the required regulatory oversight. So the city properties at this point do not meet the grant eligibility criteria. So we haven't identified any other city work that could benefit from this grant. So with that, staff is recommending that the city council authorize the city manager to submit the application as outlined in the staff report, and for the mayor to sign the reimbursement indemnification agreement. With that, I'd answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
I'd like to start with questions on this. So just for clarification, John, any private property owner could request the grant, correct?
They'd have to, the city is the grant is only eligible, or only local jurisdictions are eligible to obtain the grant. So if somebody had another private property, wanted to request the city to apply on their behalf, and they met the criteria, yes, that's possible.
So in other words, a private property owner would have to approach the city to actually request the grant, because the state will only receive requests through the city.
Correct.
Okay. And so in this case, for this grant, we were approached by BDI with a request to submit an application for the grant.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Lenz.
Thank you, Mayor. I kind of want to follow up on what you just laid out. So, John, in the staff report, it says that there are no financial impacts to the city, but the city will have to spend some time preparing the application, correct?
That's correct. But all the activities associated with the Baylands are reimbursable by the developer.
Okay, so all the time that goes into preparing the application for the grant, the city will be able to get reimbursed by BDI.
Correct.
Great. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you. As part of the committee looking at this first proposal that came to us, I mean, my personal concerns relative to the affectations for the city of Brisbane were our future, well, our current and our future liabilities, which are our safety, if you will. So hence we sent those comments back to the city to put in this report to make sure that we were as protected as possible. And I know there's no 100% protection of anything about anything, but I'm looking at my notes right here, is that we were not excuse me, we were not responsible for what happened on the Baylands. We were not responsible for the garbage that's there. We were not responsible for anything that is out there. And that is something that sits with me, and I want to make sure through our legal representation and everything moving forward that even though these are Brisbane lands, that we were not responsible for what went there before us. We were not responsible for the landfill, what was in the landfill, etc. And one of the things that struck me when we were having this conversation about this was regarding the grant for cleanup. And we asked for the change of language to make sure that it was very, very clear. And if that language is not ultimately clear tonight, I would hope that our attorneys will make sure that it is, that regardless of what we say tonight as people who are not attorneys, because I'm not an attorney, there's nobody on our city council who is currently an attorney, that we are held harmless if we apply for this grant and things go south. And so that's probably a comment that Tom needs to chime in on, because I'm ultimately concerned that whatever we agree to, that we don't agree to the liability if something goes south. Tom, would you mind?
To the extent that as you started with, there's no guarantees in life legally, but to the extent there are assurances and guarantees, you have them in this. You not only have the indemnification agreement, you have put down all the other provisions to limit what the funding would be used for, to make sure there's compliance with federal law, to make sure that they comply with federal law, federal and state in this instance. So yeah, you've put all of those in place. And you've had, I believe, 3 council, at least 2, look at it. So I don't think there's any room for gaps.
Thanks, Tom. That was just kind of an assurance that I wanted to put out there for us, the council, and for our citizens. So thank you very much. Thanks.
Councilmember Cunningham, Councilmember O'Connell, did you want to weigh in as well, since you're on that subcommittee?
I would. And Tom, just to follow up with you, you are satisfied with the reimbursement and indemnification agreement?
I am, yes.
Great, thank you. So we did get correspondence from a member of the BBCAG, the Brisbane Baylands Community Advisory group that, gosh, I think I still sit on, but they haven't met in a long time. And they were concerned that this was giving direction on how cleanup would go, or how this might affect the cleanup and how the state looks at it, or the water board, or and that is not the case. This is just to implement study level work. Is that correct?
Yes, the studies that are on the screen in front of you, those are the studies that will be funded by the grant if successful.
Okay. And that wouldn't affect any ultimate requirements by the state or these regional water boards, and it would just give direction to them, correct?
I understand that some of these studies are required by the regulators to move forward with remediation. So to the extent that these studies will inform future remediation activity, I don't know if that's your question or not, but yeah, we'd expect these to inform future remediation activities approved by the regulators.
Okay. And then in this particular grant, because we're sort of a third-party administrator in the first party, would be the best way I could put it. Is there a portion of the grant money that is for overhead of overseeing the grant, as some grants will do, or is that responsibility all on BDI, the recipient, the ultimate recipient?
To my understanding, and anybody who's more familiar with the program could certainly step in and correct me, that BDI would be responsible for all city costs of the grant administration.
So there's not a 10% overhead that's for administrative built into this grant?
I am not aware of that.
Using a 10% as a, just
Yes,
a random figure.
Mhm.
Because many grants will, have a certain amount that is for actual implementation and a certain amount that's for overhead. And I wondered if this grant had a built-in overhead limit to it.
Madam Councilwoman, that the way this is working is it's an actual direct reimbursement. So we report $2 were spent. This is what the $2 is spent on. BDI pays it back. I'm very familiar with exactly what I think you're referring to. And in those situations, there's risk because work can exceed the cap. Here we have a better situation. We're going to get a dollar for dollar return from BDI. However, on your, I believe, a separate comment, but please correct me, on whether we're going to have an additional layer of essentially grant compliance oversight. Was that what you're asking, a third party?
Well, not necessarily from a third party, but many grants have a percentage of the grant that can go for administrative purposes. And so I would want to make sure that if that's written into the grant, that some of it is for administrative, that we're the administrative, not BDI.
So we are ultimately, as the applicant, we are ultimately on paper, not only the grant administrator and will be, that's why we have the reimbursement agreement. But if we're not aggressive in overseeing it, there's risk that some of the grant money would be squandered, which is not in anybody's interest. So we'll be an aggressive overseer. And yes, we'll get dollar for dollar. It's just not set up with a percentage the way you're referring to. And I know a lot of them are. This program's not.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. That was my only question now. And I would also like to tell the council that we discussed this pretty in depth in our subcommittee meeting with the what ifs and what hows. So I won't speak for Councilmember Cunningham, but I am reasonably assured that this money will, if granted, will go to good use, and if not granted, our costs will be covered out of pocket. So thank you.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you. Just to, I might be beating a dead horse, but I just want to make sure I put as much information out as I can, be it redundant or not. Sorry, Tom. Sorry, Terry. But so looking at this scope of work on the screen right now, OU2 bunker C mobility study, $250,000, etc., on down the line. If these studies start to come in using these grants and they seem inefficient, what is our position at that point? So say, for example, I'm just going to take number one, and I'm going to be a devil's advocate. I'm going to be total butthead right now. just because if we don't do this, it will come back to haunt us in the future. OU2 Munkasi Mobility Study. We've got $250,000 set aside in this grant to do that. What if, it's probably you, Tom, what if we get into this mobility study and things go sideways in a way that we cannot even foresee right now? And it looks like, OMG, this is going to cost a lot more money. What's the procedure? How do we respond? And how does that fit into this particular grant? Just so the people who are watching now have an idea of what might happen if this goes south. Sorry, Tom.
So it's not, let me answer it this way. I think the answer is going to get exactly what you're getting at. So if this is a brownfield grant, so the goal of this is to identify environmental issues in a brownfield, which we have a mega brownfield, of course. And as those issues are identified, three things can happen. One, we can find that there aren't any issues. I don't think anybody expects that. Two, we can find that there are issues, and the next question will be, okay, if anybody wants to proceed, meaning the developer, the city, other regulators, with whatever's discovered, there's a problem found. If anybody doesn't want to proceed because of that problem, they will rely on this study. That's what the study's for. Each component is to tell them what's going on actually on the ground, in the dirt, et cetera. And then the third thing is, and this is not unusual, if the land is far worse than, for example, the owner expected it to be, and they've budgeted X for the project and remediation is going to be astronomically higher, then you're not going to see building out there. You're going to see a question about whether or not this would be classified under some other program for long-term remediation, perhaps with public funds, not city funds, federal funds in all likelihood. So these grants are to tell you what's going on a scientific level and to give everybody, including the owner and the city, a chance to say, okay, based on what we just saw, is this the way we want to proceed, or how do we proceed safely? That's what they're for.
Tom, thanks. I think that was a great answer. That's all my questions.
Councilmember Davis?
Actually, all of my questions have been answered previously.
Okay. Councilmember Lenz?
After public comment, I'm ready to move forward. Thank you.
Okay. City Clerk, do we have any members of the public who wish to speak on this?
Madam Mayor, I have not received any text messages or emails. If members of the public would like to make public comment, please raise the hand button on the Zoom.
And did we not have one piece of correspondence on this as well?
We did have one correspondence to note for the record from Dana Dilworth.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, I see no raised hands.
Okay. Any further council discussion, or else I'm willing to entertain a first and second motion on this?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
I will second.
We have roll call, please.
Councilmember Cunningham,
Aye.
Councilmember Davis,
Aye.
Councilmember Lentz,
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell,
Aye.
and Mayor Mackin.
Aye. Thank you. We move on to staff report. City manager's report on upcoming activities, please.
Ingrid, did the council deal with both I or 1 and 2? Do we need 2 motions there?
I believe they did it together.
Did it together? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Tom, you're good with that?
Yeah, that's what I thought the motion was.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Okay, if do the report on upcoming activities.
Let me, hold on, let me pull that up.
Thanks. We need to go back.
Is this
There,
the first?
yeah, there you go. Well, you had it. So that's the first one. Lost it again. There you go.
Okay.
Okay. So donations are still being accepted to support Ukrainian refugees. All funds raised will be donated directly to the Fellow Lions in Poland. Thank those who've already donated. Those that are looking to do so to show their support can access the donation site at brisbanelions.org. Mission Blue Nursery Spring Sale this Saturday. You can pick up San Bruno Mountain native flora between 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. at 3435 Bayshore Boulevard in Brisbane. This is a interesting program that is being offered in our county. It's a curbside tax document drop-off on March 19th. You don't miss out on this opportunity in San Mateo before tax filing deadline. This event will happen, rain or shine, at the Martin Luther King Jr. Center located at 725 Monte Diablo Avenue in San Mateo, California. Bring copies of your tax documents, no originals, please. Fill out tax aids questionnaire and leave the rest of to the tax aid volunteers. Tax aid helps people who earn less than $58,000 a year. Their services are provided free of charge by volunteers who donate their time. More about the info on the tax aids curbside drop-off can be found at tax/aid.org. The City of Brisbane 20th Annual Artist Evening of Sharing will be on Saturday, March 19th at 7 p.m. You can join us for an inspiring showcase of local artists, musicians, performers, filmmakers, and writers. In the interest of safety, this event will be shared via live stream. Details can be found at brisbaneca.org/AES. We held the scoping session for the Towers project out at Sierra Point on March 15th. The notice of preparation of an EIR has been released, and comments and suggestions as the appropriate scope of analysis in the EIR are invited from all interested parties. Written comments can be directed to Kelly Biggs at kbiggs@brisbaneca.org until 5 p.m. on March 29th. Our rental assistance program is still available after March 31st. The state's Housing is Key program to assist renters and landlords with rent and utility payments is coming to a close at the end of the month, but the city's rental assistance program will still be available after that date. You can contact the Community Resource Center at the YMCA. And finally, we're hiring summer interns at the time of the year. We'll have positions in human resources, city clerk's office, public works utilities, and public works sustainability. Please help share that we will be accepting applications for our summer intern program. You can go to calops.org/city of Brisbane for an application. And that's all for tonight, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Clay. Those are some really good internship opportunities. We move on to Mayor Council matters, our subcommittee reports. I'm going to start this time. Karen and I had a public information and technology meeting on March the 10th. And this was to examine new technology that could be considered augmenting as a tool for our police department. Also would save them a lot of time on investigations. Generally, it's going to be brought to the council at a later date. I don't want to ruin the surprise, so I'm not going to go into more detail. Karen, would you like to add something to that?
You know, it's something that has been talked about for a long time. It's a long time coming, and hopefully we are all going to be thrilled with what is being proposed and what's going to come forward. Just an awesome thing for the entire county. And yeah, I'll shut up. I've got 5 other.
I would just liken it to when computers were first utilized by police forces, what a major impact they had. And I think this is going to run a pretty close second, if approved, that it will really just augment things tremendously. So we were both very excited, and I hope you will be too. You'll be hearing more about it. That's all I'm going to tell you. I had one other meeting as well, infrastructure, utilities, and franchise. Cliff and I met with staff of our consultant about water and sewer rate study. Cliff, you want to talk about that?
Sure, Madam Mayor. It was actually really cool to be on a subcommittee that I have not been on before. And it was quite the learning curve. I mean, you're an old pro, Colleen. So thank you for being patient with me as I asking all those questions, trying to get up to speed. But, it was really just depthy information. And, but super important, right? We're dealing with water and sewer and, how do you create that sustainable future? And just dealing with these super high costs that we're dealing with today. Water is up 67%. Sewer rates up 242%, right? And then how do you come up with a fair and equitable way to create revenue to cover those costs going up, through the roof? And I really like the conversation that we had with our consultant and Stewart, and I feel just kind of getting into the weeds. That we'll eventually be able to come up with a fair and equitable way of increasing those revenues that we can bring to the council, and then have that full community discussion.
Yeah, we asked a lot of questions and gave them a lot of input, so they anticipate we may have several meetings before this ever comes back to the council. But we're working really hard on it, and they're working extra hard on it. So I appreciate their effort. Cliff, as long as you're there, do you have any other items you want to report on?
I don't think so. I think that was it.
Okay. All right. Councilmember Davis?
Yeah, Karen and I had a public art committee meeting. We discussed creating an RFP to attract a curator to help us work on selecting art for the park behind the bathrooms. And we also decided to elect or appoint a chair and vice chair. So the chair is Danette Davis, and the vice chair is Camille Salmon.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember O'Connell?
I think I've reported out on all my meetings. I think I had a light week this week, unless I'm forgetting something.
Okay. All right. City Clerk, do we have any?
Hello.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Cunningham.
Don't forget me over here. I
I'm
had
so
4
sorry.
meetings. I have 4 meetings this week. Actually,
Oh, no.
I had 6 meetings this week. Thanks, everybody. So the city manager's ad hoc committee regarding Clay's unfortunate retirement at some point. We had that meeting. The biggest thing for me were the CCAG So we had the CCAG Legislative Committee meetings, and just so you all know, the CCAG Legislative Committee, which is the subcommittee of the CCAG board, we approve or deny the motions being brought forward from the state. And actually, it's a really wonderful place to be because we say no to many, 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 many things. And at the Legislative Committee, we are looking at the secret exemptions, and we took on SB 922. Everybody needs to please take a look at this. We took a no position on that, but from our lawyers, we were told, well, it was recommended that we basically take a look and see attitude, but the legislative board didn't like this at all. And if I can encourage anybody and everybody on the city council, on staff, and people who might be watching tonight to really look at these legislative agendas that are coming forward. There are so many crazy things that are being proposed by the state that the CCAG board of San Mateo County have taken no positions on so many things that have actually been passed in the state legislature, which are just insane to us. But everybody should probably take a look at the Baird and Driscoll 21 elements category exemptions if you're interested in how housing is going to proceed in our areas. I think that is really, really important. And we need to query something that I'm going to put out to you all, which is Executive Order N-19-19. And just really take a look at it. So anybody who's interested in how housing is going to proceed in our communities, these would be things that are really very important. Something else, Senate Bill 922, the secret exemptions, frightening, absolutely frightening. So we took a no position on those things relative to SB 9922, but I would encourage everybody to take a look at those and make comments back to the state and our local legislators relative to that. And I'm very grateful to be on this CCAG board. Thank you.
Did you have other subcommittee reports, Councilmember Kennedy?
Well, it was all covered. Everybody else kind of covered them, I think.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yes, I did. I had many.
Thanks for those updates. I'm going to go look those up.
Yes, please do. Everybody.
City Clerk, did we receive any other written communication?
Madam Mayor, we did receive written correspondence from Tom Hines and Dana Dilworth. And also Dana Dilworth provided correspondence regarding the Brownfield grant.
Okay, thank you. We move to oral communications number 2. And do we have any member of the public wishing to make public comment at this time?
Madam Mayor, I see no hands raised, and I did not receive any emails or text messages at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. That being said, everyone, thank you for your participation. It's not quite the weekend, but have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next month. Meeting's adjourned at 8:55 p.m.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a nice weekend, everyone.
Bye-bye.